When we criticize the church for its failures to live up to its moral calling, for its failures to treat every human person with dignity, we're actually employing arguments that we got from the church against the church. And we should do that. By the way, the church, we should always stand up against injustice and immorality and sin and call it out. We need to be courageous in this. But it'll never go away. There will always be tares growing up among the wheat. But this raises an interesting question. So I've been saying that this whole idea of morality and ethics actually comes from Christianity. Well, there are plenty of people in the secular world who would say, wait. Are you trying to say that if I'm going to be a good person, I have to be a Christian? Of course, that's not the case. You probably know, I know many non-believers, atheists, who are good, moral people. Absolutely. And the Catechism says this is possible, that there can be a good, decent person who's an atheist. Pope Francis has said this. He's even said that atheists might go to heaven. Anyway, but it raises the question, can there be morality without religion? Well, yes. Even before Christianity came on the scene, there were lots of good moral people in paganism. We know this. Okay? So it wasn't as though everyone was just absolutely wicked before the church came. No, there were good people both in Judaism and among the Gentiles before Christianity. And yet, I think we do have to say the teaching of the church on the Imago Dei, on the image and likeness of God, the dignity of the human person, changes something. And now, especially now, like in a post-Christian culture, as we move away from that teaching, away from that image, I think we have to concede that something disappears when this happens. C. Kevin Rowe makes this point really strongly in starting around page 50 of this book. It's difficult. Part of the reason for this is what Rowe argues. I don't think this is the only reason, but part of the reason for this is it's difficult to maintain a motivation for morality if there's not this sort of undergirding vision of the human person as having this image and likeness of God, this dignity that comes from God. So if human beings are not created in God's image, then why do I owe them this dignity in this respect? It's a good question. He talks about a particular time in history. He's saying, this idea of trying to have morality without Christianity, like taking away the religious husk and just keeping like the good bits, right? The ethics, the morality. This has been tried before. And he talks about a emperor named Julian the Apostate. It's on page 53 of your book, Christianity Surprise. So, just to give you a little bit of background here, what's happened is the Roman Empire has become Christian following Constantine. So Constantine is in the early 400s. Well, a couple generations later, a young man named Julian, who had been raised as a Christian, he reverts to paganism. He abandons the Christian faith, and he goes back to the old ways of his ancestors, and he outlaws Christianity. So there's, after Christianity had enjoyed, a couple generations of peace and not being persecuted by the Roman Empire, then you have another pagan emperor all of a sudden named Julian the Apostate. And Julian, he was bothered by the fact that the Christians had all the hospitals, the schools, that charity was associated with Christianity. And he wanted his pagan people to outdo the Christians in good works. This is what Rowe writes. What most people don't know is that this, trying to have morality without Christianity, has already been tried. In the 4th century, the Roman Emperor Julian renounced and subsequently detested the Christian faith, but he retained an admiration for the works of charity that Christian communities promoted and exhibited. In a well-known letter to one of his pagan high priests, Julian mentioned his distrust of the motivation of the Galileans, but noted that they were kind to strangers and, quote, support not only their poor, but ours as well. Everyone can see that our people lack aid from us. So everyone knows that Christians treat even our own people better than we do. Julian the Apostate, as later tradition would call him, therefore harassed Christians while at the same time setting about trying to energize Roman pagans to produce their own philanthropic works. It failed. Absent the sense that the human is the image of Christ, and that by attending to the human we tend to Christ, absent the sense that the human requires our care regardless of the difference between friend and stranger, absent the sense that the human can be seen for what it is only through extensive social and political display, absent all this and more, there is nothing to keep the specifically Christian works alive. Julian's pagan revival had no ground to stand on. He could not make people care simply by declaring that they should, nor could he jumpstart good works by attempting to ignite pagan religious life. The whole project was a flop. Retaining Christian life and a vision of what it means to be human without the Christianity was impossible. If modern atheists are honest, they have to concede that much of their notion of basic human decency is actually received from Christianity. And the only way for an atheist to be really consistent about this would be to embrace a sort of Nietzschean. So Nietzsche was a German philosopher who wrote this book called Beyond Good and Evil. And that's really the only sort of construct that's consistent here, is to just sort of like say there isn't a good and evil. But most non-believers aren't really willing to go that far.